We continue on Tractate Psachim, page 9. Uncertainty situation. Safek, or sometimes feika. If a person is not sure, trace a situation. A fellow bought a meat and it was 9 stores that sells non-kosher food, 1 store selling a kosher food, and that fellow is not sure which store he purchased his meat. Should we say we go by the majority of those stores, or should we say no, this meat is most probably kosher? As one example. Morning. Another example, uncertainty in the searching of chametz, uncertainty in searching for a situation of a corpse, and more. So the topic today mainly is situation of uncertainty, and sometimes, yes, but it will be simple, God willing, uncertainty within uncertainty. Today on page 9 in Tractate Psachim, I ask all of you to keep your heads high and focus in a full gear. It's a friend of mine, he's an attorney, so one time I visited his office, so you have like a little chart, but only face his face, not the other side, and it's for the whole attorney in that group, and said, do not open your mouth before your head and brain is in a full gear. So try to stay in full gear, because we are going to deal with things that basically simple as long as we are focusing. Mishnah, top of page 9. Ready? אין חוששים, שמה גררה חולדה מבית לבית ומקום למקום, ואם כן מחצר לחצר מעיר לעיר, אין לה דבר סוף. Once it was a great rabbi by the name of Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman. So he wrote a book called Kovetz Shiurim, and he tried to zoom in and explain to us here the situation of uncertainty. A fellow searched a house. Now he searched a house or searched some domain, and is a concern. What's the concern? Unfortunately, in some places they have what do you have for the chulda? Martin or something like that. Anyway, it's a like some type of mice people have, unfortunately. Okay. So the fellow searched one part of his house. That's what they said. אין חוששים שמגירה חולדה מבית לבית, ממקום למקום, דין כן, מחצר לחצר מעיר לעיר, אין דבר סוף. He searched one part of his house, and now he's about to search another part in the house. But unfortunately, that house, let's face it, have some mice. Now he's concerned. Why? Because sometimes you see the mice, especially the big one, they carry a slice of bread and run from one location to another. So he searched in one place, and now maybe he searched the other one. Meanwhile, the mice see him, he sneak in between some holes, and he get the other side, and he have the bread on that side. So for that concept, we go much deeper. So the Elchanan Wasserman said that this one concept, it's called siba, a reason, and the other one, it's siman, meaning re'aya, sign. So one said that you cannot search in any place, every place. Why? Because this is some of the decree that tzibur lo yachol lamod, but people cannot, you can't ask people to go so far. Rashi said, okay, you search in one place, and now you're going to search another place, and meanwhile there's all kind of animals running around in those, especially ancient homes. So to feel like that, it's you need to have a guard in every room. When you leave one room, you go to another room and you have a guard. That's something that people cannot take. Now, if it's come from courtyard to courtyard, that's a little different, right? That's something that you don't have a concern, because think together with me. If that's the case, you ask a person to search the entire domain in one time, and the Marsha said you need to have other people helping you. So trace the situation. You take 3 friends, you go to a big mansion, big house, you check one room and you put this guard. This fellow need to check that there's no mice coming in that room. Now you go to another one. Now we go to another one. How far you can go with that? So there is a discussion among two great ancient sages. One is the Tosfot and one is the Maharam Chilawa. So the discussion here traces the situation. A fellow have children, and especially little children. So there are places that they always reach. So the question Tosfot asked, you remember the previous Mishnah we said clearly that any place that you don't bring a chametz, you shouldn't bother to search. So why need to bother with this issue with mice moving around, etc., etc.? So they explained. I'll give you an example. In my time, many years ago, when I was a student, so we have one of the teachers. He has to have very large, old. If you remember those old American laundry machine, the old one, it's a large one. So it comes eve of Passover, and he was in a quandary. Should I move that machine? Should I check behind this machine? It's very unlikely that someone get there, but he have a large family. To make it short, he decided, I'll call several students, and together we're going to push this huge machine around and check. Guess what? Sure enough, after we group of people moved the machine, it was a big chunk of slices of bread behind that. Who puts it there? One of the kids hide his sandwiches over there. Okay? So the point is, every place you have children come in. So they said, if you go in that direction and you're concerned about it, so now you should worry from one courtyard, it may transfer to another courtyard, and from one city transfer to another city. If you start thinking about mice running around and transfer food from one location to another, ein ladavar sof. There is no end to this matter, and the world will be impossible to rely on any search for chametz, for leaven. So there is a book called Netivot. One is called Netivot, is a book called Mekor Chaim. So he explained it beautifully, and he said, you have to remember that all of that is rabbinic decree. You remember we said many times that by the Torah, what's the condition of the Torah? The Torah wants us to say a nullification, to express. First is to say it in your heart. If you wish to, you can also express us in word, which will be. The sages come in and said, okay, we understand that you declare honorless, but we ask you to go and search. So the rabbis go and ask us to do it in a place that people put the chametz. People usually does that, but to be concerned about animals, that's something that the Netivot said you do not go that direction. If you go to where animals putting things, you never end it. So because otherwise Maharam Chilwa said that you have to ask endless people to come and guard every single domain after you're done, and it never ended. So imagine in those years that Gail and I and others dealt with serious security issues. So I remember those years, unfortunately in Israel it was a lot of piguim, a lot of shaheeds, people that went and just blew themselves or do all kind of crazy thing and kill mass of people. So it was a discussion in those days about security measure. How far you go and have people searching, or have people standing in tatzpiyot in different locations to watch over if there's any terrorists or anyone come in. And the conclusion is, with all the security measures, there is amount of manpower you can use, there is amount of people you can use. You cannot overwhelm the society and everyone to be a security guard. You need to go. One of the things that you fight terrorism is to ask people the next moment, not the next day, even the next moment, to go to a coffee shop, to go to a mall, to go to places like nothing happened. And if you start scare people and ask everyone to be the guard, you never end it. So back to our subject, when it's come to this, you can't search a room and then have somebody else guard in order to make sure that the mice or someone not come in, and then you go to another room and go to another room. You never end it. So now we go to the Gemarrah, and it said, Tama de lo chazeina de shakal. You know why we have this discussion? Because we didn't see this martyr, this large mice come from one location to another. Ha chazeina de shakal. If we see in our eyes that happened, guess what? Chayshinanu ba'ibdika. Then it's a different story. If you see the mice running around with this little, and if you are lucky and there's no woman around to scream, so you have right to go again and search. Ve'amai, why you need to search again? Neima achaltei. You may say that mice just ate it, right? He carried this little bread and then he ate it. So now we bring a source. And now we're going to a different location. You know, in the Talmud language, we said many times, you have one location and then you bring a source from another location and you juxtapose. So you have in Tractate Aholot, in chapter 18, they speak about situation of idolaters. What's the issue of idolater? The ancient idolaters, it's hard for us to comprehend that because you don't see it much in our society, maybe in the third world. But one of the things they did is they have which called nefel. Baby was born to a woman, and that baby died, unfortunately, less than 30 days period. So they just trash the baby. I mean, if it happens, like, let's exaggerate and say the baby is like 2 weeks old and past, so in ancient time they just trash it, not even bother to bury, or sometimes they just dig something and bury it. So by us, you know, it's a very different things. We go to the whole trouble of creating a proper grave, etc., etc. So we ask a question in regards to law of purity. What's the law of purity? So he explains that if you have a body of any corpse of human, makes no difference in that sense if it's an idolater or a fellow Israelite. It's an issue of transferring impurity. So for example, the issue of Kohen to be there, etc. So there is a disputation among the Tanaim what exactly the state of impurity in that situation. So they said, if it's ohel meaning it's like a tent, a spot that body. So you know that Kohen not allowed to enter the cemetery. It's an issue of impurity. So since it's a dead body there, so all that ohel, all that domain is basically in a state of impurity. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, it apply only b'maga if you touch the body, or b'masa if you somehow carry the body, meaning a pure person carry that corpse. But he said, if you concerned that these idolaters throw those babies below than 30 days, it's called nefel. So let's understand, because I'm going to use the word nefel. Just nefel is less than 30 days. They take the nefel and trash it, so it's a concern that maybe someone going to move that body and therefore it becomes impure. So they said, medorot ha'ovdei kochavim tmeim. If you know this location, there are people like that doing this type of nefels, that they just put it, trash it, or they some of them just bury them in their domain, in their house, in their spot. So you have to be concerned. So Rashi said, what they do is they didn't bury their nefels, but they trash it. So according to the sages, they carry this ohel tum'ah, which means ohel, if you are in that domain, in that spot, in that house, it transfer it even without touching. The Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said only if you either carry it or touch it, then became impure. So it's important to note that the Rashash said in the end that apply only if it's reached the point of the deceased, the dead body tent. which means, for example, if the dead body, the nefel, is one side, and he put the tent on the top of that. So what happened is, it's almost the same as maga, it's attached directly. Again, the Rashash tells us that if you have this core, this nefel in one side of the tent, so it already part of that tent, meaning, again, even by Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, it's considering the same as maga, the same as you touch it. So to clarify for those who walk in, the idea is sometimes we say that you do not need to physically touch a dead body. Sometimes in a certain domain it's already contaminated. You know, like you go to a hospital, they give you a certain sign in certain rooms, you need to carry gloves, you need to carry a special thing, they tell you not to shake hands or not to touch to the ill person, right? So in that sense, when you have nefel in a certain domain, so we say that even you don't touch it, you're already part of being recipient of state of impurity. So he said, "V'chama yishhe b'mador, v'yeh mador tzarich b'dika." So now imagine you have a fellow Jew and you have that fellow idolater that puts nefel, a dead body, below than 30 days. He puts it there. So now we ask a measurement. How far we can go in searching if is nothing there. Such an example, let's say that this fellow Jew, let's call him Reuven, he went there and he purchased it from a fellow, let's call him for the sake of understanding, John. He purchased from John a place and he knew that mentality in that area, they're throwing nephalim on the ground. They don't go to a burial or anything. So now he needs to search to make sure that there's no nefel in that area. So how far he needs to go? So he said, 40 yom, 40 days from the time that the baby formulate, which means Rashi said the time of the development of the fetus that carries a level of impurity, the time measurement is 40 days. So and again, we talk about miscarriage or nefel. It's a situation like nefel. The best situation is that they have relation, and then in a measurement of 40 days and onward, she miscarried the baby, and they just trash it in the ground. So they said, "V'afal pi she'en lo isha," and they said another thing. Even this idolater is not a married man. Why? So Rashi explained here that unfortunately there are those idolaters, it's probably in those days in particular, that they constantly involved with a adultery. So in other words, they brought overnight a woman, and it may happen that they have a constant this type of relation, and either she have some fear or other reason, she became pregnant and she just miscarried the baby and thrashed it in that place. So it's not necessarily a married man the way that Rashi described it here. So v'chol makom shechulda v'chazir יכולים להלוך אין צריך בדיקה, but we make here some exceptions. He said any place that you have chulda, I think chulda is marten, right? And chazir is like pig. So any
weasel, yeah.
Weasel, I mean, yeah. Okay. Any place that the weasel or pig enter there, you don't need to search. Why? Because especially in that time they used to have this measurement by having this weasel or pig. They go and dig in and eat it. So now we juxtapose to our discussion what we said. We talk about martyr or mice that carry from one location to another, and we ask a question: how far you're concerned if they're going to eat the piece of bread or not. So we compare it to our discussion with the nefel. So Amar Rabbi Zera lo kasha. So what happened here? We see here a contradiction, because in one place we said that you are concerned, in other places said that you are not. So Rabbi Zera said lo kasha, ha bevasar ha belechem, bevasar lo meshayra, belechem meshayra. Beautiful. He said, let's face it. What happened to people? People basically eats all kind of different foods. Animals, what did animals eat usually? You guys have animals, so you know better than me. Animals, if they have a choice between meat and bread, what they're going to eat? Meat. So our assumption is you cannot juxtapose the two different brighter, the two different sources, because if it's come to a quote-unquote meat, those animals such as pig, etc., they're going to eat it. If it's bread, like the story of the mice, it may left over and not eat it. So therefore you cannot compare the two. Amar Rava Haimai. So Rava said, what is that question? So Rashi here explained, and I dealt with that in my book, what exactly my high, and the Rashi explained and make it in short, what exactly the kushia, what is exactly the question here. Bishlama hatam, if you talk about those houses that belongs to the idolaters, you do not need to search in those spots that you have a pig or martyr. Why? Emu hava, emu lo hava. It's very unlikely that they have nefel over there. And if you tell me in those rare occasions that they trash a nefel over there, you can go in leniency and say that lizard already ate it. Why? Because it's a spot that you have many type of animals like lizards there. So Rashi said, sometimes even those animals left over some of the meat, and it's a big uncertainty, big safek if they are still there. Aval hacha devadai. But here, before the fellow search for chametz, there is chametz anywhere. Remember we talk about the laundry machine? There are chametz that spread either by kids or by all kind of sources doing the yik in plenty, in every place. Dachazenash de shakal, and we said on top of that what we said, that we talk a situation that this large mice or martyr, we saw that it carries this slice of bread from one location to another. Miyemar da'achaltei, who tells you that they ate it? Havei safek uvadai ve'en safek motzi midei vadai. So you have here on one hand a situation of uncertainty, on the other hand you have a situation that it's clear uncertainty, and therefore if you have a uncertainty and with not certainty, the principle is that an uncertainty does not override a certainty. So just a vignette of that, it's a discussion here in Tosfot. Tosfot said that if you have an uncertainty, for example, if it was a question, if it is a nefel there, so if it's nefel or not nefel, and if he ate it or not ate it, it's called sfek sfeika. It's uncertainty within an uncertainty. So very tzad rachok, very far away, that there is a nefel. So within that, if it ate it or not, so let's talk first a little musagim, a little concept before we go further with Tosfot and others. The musag is called ein safek motzi midei vadai. When you have something that it's certain and you have something that it's uncertain, you cannot derive the uncertain from the certain. So number one, the question is if it's nefel or not. Number two, if these mice go and take it or carry it or bring it back or eat it, right? So it's uncertainty within uncertainty. So how you go about with that? Imagine a simple situation. I come to you and I said, all right, you owe me $100, $100. So if I claim that you owe me $100, I need to bring a proof. I have the burden of proof to prove that you borrow from me $100. As long as I don't bring a proof, you don't owe me anything, correct? Now, if you see a uncertainty situation, now you go by one of the two. According to Rashi, it's called Rov. And David is a statistician, so he tells you there is a difference between statistician and assumption, which means if you have a statistic, Rashi call it Rov, the majority. Tosfot call it Shachiach, what is real, usual, in a usual manner. what happened usually? So imagine, let's call that fellow, for the sake of understanding, let's call him John. And John is well known alcoholic. And you see a bottle of cognac next to him. And you see him carry a big smell. But you did not see him drinking that bottle. So what do you have an assumption? Maybe he drank, maybe he didn't. Now you said, well, his smell come out of his mouth. So that may happen for different reasons, many different reasons. So you have uncertainty within uncertainty, right? But that's basically, it's not so much, because everyone knows that this fellow, this John, is a fellow that always drink. Okay? So Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman asked a question. He said, usually we go by the majority. That's usually Holchim Achar Rov. It was a great rabbi by the name of Elchanan Wasserman that he dealt with that question at length. So he said, if you deal in one hand with statistic, and on the other hand there is called histabrut, which means what you usually assume with the usual manner. David, you tell us, what's the difference between statistic and assumption?
Well, statistics, there's a mathematical basis behind it. An assumption, you're just assuming.
Right.
You're just making something up, essentially.
Make something up. But you go by the assumption, right? What usual happen. So, imagine, let's talk a simple situation. We said in Rosh Chodesh Ya'aleh V'Yavo, a special prayer that applies to Rosh Chodesh. Now you finish the Amidah, and guess what? You're not sure, right? If you said it or not. If you know for sure you didn't say it, you need to repeat the Amidah. But if you are uncertain, should you repeat or not repeat?
If you're uncertain with it, or if you just missed a part of it and you're uncertain, you should not repeat it again.
Okay. Now the big question is, I wish that is so simple. I wish.
Well, yeah, we learned in Brachot though that you should assume, because since we normally would say the entire Amidah, that we should assume then that if we're not certain that we did.
Not you did. But let's trace a scenario that the person is totally spaced out doing prayer, which happened to some people, right? And he is now said, I assume, I didn't even realize that today is Rosh Chodesh.
Ah, okay.
Right?
That's different.
Okay? So, what do you go? By the statistic or by the assumption? So, what I try to tell you is, it's here, we ask a question, Ve'ein safek motzi midei vadai? If you have this type of situation that your uncertainty really does not override a certainty, Ve'atanya, chaver shemet, now we juxtapose to another sugya. We said, you have chaver, it meaning a fellow that we trust, a Torah scholar or someone that you know that he is a pious person and very scrupulous when it's come to Judaism and Jewish law. So, as you know, that we are obligated over any produce in Eretz Israel to take a part and put it at tithe. So here you have a fellow that is no longer among the living, and he left produce. So he said, Chaver shemet, if a fellow Chaver, right, that we trust, passed, Ve'eniach megura melea pirot is a large treasure, large amount of, let's say, wheat or other produce, field of, let's say, oranges, field of produce. So we don't know if that fellow, it's fresh from yesterday. We don't know if this fellow already tightened them or not. And sometimes it's a large quantity. Tight, thank you. Va'afilu bnei yomam. So even it happened today. Let's say they collected early in the morning the peaches, right, in the field. They put it in that large room, and unfortunately the fellow is no longer among the living. So what do? So he said, "Harei hen bechezkat metukanim." So we figure out that most probably it's already tied. Okay? Now, so they ask a question, remember, those produce, if you don't tie them, they are called tevel, which means tevel is in a state of hopefully temporarily states. That you have a produce, they have potential for eating as long as you take a portion and tie them. But as long as you're not tithing them, they are under the domain it's called tevel. So maybe you say that they are tevel. Why? Because originally speaking, the moment that they collected from their field, they are tevel. וספק מאוסרים, ספק לא מאוסרים. We don't know if that חבר did a tithe before he passed, and what we said, וכעת הספק, הוא מוציא מדי ודאי. So even that it's uncertain if that fellow scholar really did tithe, we put an assumption. We go here not by statistic, but by assumption. Since most of the chaverim, they tightening, right? Tightening?
Tithing.
Thank you. Tithing their produce before it's coming out of their hands. So you know that this is a situation that uncertainty does override a certainty. So now you see a contradiction to what we said earlier, because what we said earlier, that uncertainty does not override a certainty, correct? So they said hatam over there, no. Vadai uvadai hu. Come on, there is the conflict between the certainty and the certainty. As the produce certainty type, it's in accordance with the way that is for sure tied the vadai masri, because they for sure they certainty and certainty, they for sure they have certainty that they tie. כרבי חנינא חוזר, רבי חנינא in place called חוזר, ואמר רבי חנינא חוזר חזקה על חבר שאין מוציא מידו דבר שאינו מתוקן. So the concept of חזקה apply, you trust something. חזקה, for example, if someone does something 3 times, or something that you can trust that that fellow all the times does that. So he said, you have here the presumption that chaver, it does not allow produce that is not ritually prepared to have in his possession. So therefore, it is certain that the produce is tied. They always does that right away. Why? So the Meiri explained that usually those people, imagine this chaver have a large family. He figure out maybe some kids or someone going to pick up something. So he right away, when he bring this tevel, he right away, before anything else, he tied them. So this is just a side note. There's a machloket between Babylon and Jerusalem Talmud. They said here in Jerusalem Talmud that that as long as you don't see him, it's an issue. Babylonian Talmud said that the Meiri explained that since you have this chazakah, that most of the time those chaverim making this tithe right away, so even the person passed, we have the assumption that the moments that produce enter to his domain, it's already tied. Anyway, v'baitema is another angle to look at that. You said safek v'safek hu. You have here uncertainty and uncertainty. So because you're not sure if it tied this produce, so he said dilma meikara delot vile. Because biblically speaking, midoraita, even in house, it doesn't need to bring this tie. כרבי יהושע, ברבי יהושע, מערים אדם על תבואתו ומכניסה. Meaning, a person can pile up his produce and bring there before it's completed. So it's like employ artifice to circumvent obligations incumbent upon him dealing with his grain. So what did he do? He bring it to a courtyard, במות שלה, כדי שיהיה במתו אוכלת, ופטורה מן המעשר. So what did he do? He take it earlier, and he make it as achilat arai. So let me show with you how it works. Rabbinically speaking, any time that the persons eat, it's not considering a permanent eating, it's considering something temporary. When it's come to animals, we always hold it as a temporary food. We don't hold it, the animals have a clear measure of a permanent eating. So for our discussion, we said here, the way that he brought this grain, this food in his house, is in a state of temporary. It's not a permanent manner. So therefore, the uncertainty if he tied them or not resolve. So here, just as a side, is a disputation between Rashi and Tosfot. Tosfot said here, משמע תבל שראה פני הבית אפילו בהמה נמי לא אכלה. So they ask a question, both Rashi and Tosfot. The Gemarrah tells us that it's uncertainty within uncertainty. Why? Because you have here Chaver shemet, this fellow that passed, and he left this field of produce. So what do you think? You think that the orphan, the children, can go ahead and eat it. But what we said, that only achilat keva, only eating as a permanent matter, apply only to animals. A person, by rabbinic decree, he shouldn't eat it. So how come the orphans allowed to eat? So explain, Tosfot said, you speaking here only in the food that fitting for animal consumption only. Rashi said, since it's rabbinic, so we dealt with a safek motzi midei vadai, which means if it's uncertain, you can say that this does not override certainty. So even that it's a permanent, it's only rabbinic. So Rashi said that all that uncertainty, the big question is if it's a biblical or rabbinic. As a side note, there is a question that I heard from Reb Moshe Chavroni, also Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, and also Reb Chaim Ozer. Is the same question that said that lakoach patur midoraita, the persons, if it's a biblically speaking here, since you have a doubt, he is exempt in a biblical, but the rabbinic, the rabbis put boundaries and they said that he is responsible. So if someone inherited tevel, which means a produce that wasn't tied, so the big question is tiding is rabbinic, is not biblical, right? So there is a book called Minchat Chinuch in Shin Tzadikei in 395. You have a long discussion over that. If you hold that inheritor have the same category as a regular customer, such as a person that purchased something from someone, so let's say you own a grocery store that's selling a produce, and you are a regular buyer, and you're now not sure if the person tied it or not, okay, so now it's one state of uncertainty, and you treat it the same, the inheritor has the same state of uncertainty, the same category as a regular customer, or not. Why? Because Ben Kra de Avua, the son maybe follow his father, and he is always have the assumption that he's tithing. So he said that if this is uncertainty, does override certainty or not? Because if it's rabbinic, so it's we are going much lenient than it's biblical. So if you talk about animal that eat, so we are not obligated over animals eating when it's come to Passover. We only obligated in the sense of deriving joy or benefit. So the big question is, when it's come to tevel, is that considering a prohibition of eating or prohibition of deriving any joy from that? So when we don't have the time here, Tosfot dealing with that at length, but if you want to deal more with that, there is a Minchat Chinuch, there is a beautiful book called Minchat Chinuch that he dealt with that at length, so in Shin Tzadikei 395. So he said, Ve'en safek motzi midei vadai. So you said, and then it is so that the uncertainty does not override certainty. Ve'atanya, we learn from the Braita. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Maaseh b'shifchato shel matzik echad. It was a fellow Jew, unfortunately, that was very violent. He's very hard to deal with. A person that no one likes, and he was very physically abusive.
A powerful person who was not above using force to obtain his will.
Okay, that's nice way to put it.
Nice way to put it.
Okay, look, the English translation always supersede my. Anyway, Berimon. Rimon is the name of a place. She'etir hanefel lebo. So you have here a situation that they have a Canaanite maid of that very unpleasant person, and she took the nefel and threw it in the pit. ובא כהן והציץ בו לידיים זכר עם נקבה. So here is a fellow Kohen, a priest, that he went there to that pit and he need to check it. So I ask you a question, why this Kohen needs to bother to look if the nefel is in a pit or not in a pit? So either you say that he's a relative, or is one that asks, one who try to help a situation like that, because you don't know if it's holding a state of impurity or not. Why? Because, you know, biblically speaking, there is different, that woman that miscarriage, she have the same as nida, meaning she have a certain time that she is in a state of impurity. So it depends what type of baby come out. If it's a male baby, the Torah said that it's 7 days period. If it's a female, it's 2 weeks. So right after that, the woman need to duck herself in a mikveh, and then she have a period of days that it's pure, a state of purity. So if it's a male, it's 33 days, and if it's a female, the Torah said it's 66 days. Now, we don't know with this nefel belongs to the maid, or Canaanite maid, or the wife of that fellow. It's just the Tosfot said that it's clearly the maid did it, but here this Kohen was sent to search that baby. He wants to know if it's a male or female. So as a side note, we should know that Torah said Daber al bnei Yisrael. So the Gemarrah teaches from the Ribui that that's apply also to a Canaanite maid, that when it's come to a state of impurity after delivering a baby, it's not apply only to the fellow Israelite, but also apply to a Canaanite maid, that it's carry that state of impurity. Now this Kohen wants to know if that's a male or female baby. So either you go by saying that he was a minor, or you say that he is uneducated fellow. Soon you see it. So he get there and he look at this pit. So Tosfot said that there has to be a Canaanite maid, and he is searching there, and he said, so they come before the sages and ask a question, what do you do now with that nefel? So they said, since they have over there weasel, or they have bardelas. Bardelas is a, what is called polecat.
Yep, polecats are good.
So this eating those nefels, so the sages come and said you shouldn't worry about it. So Tosfot here asked a question: what exactly is this Kohen? What type of why he bothered to search there? So Rashi said that he wasn't scrupulous when it comes to sins. He wasn't educated. Tosfot said that he was a shote, meaning someone who has no brain, right? A person that in one hand you try to help others, but you're harming yourself. You are a Kohen, you're not supposed to go close to contact with dead, so you try to help the fellow, but you're harming yourself meanwhile. So they said here, we know here that it's certain that she miscarried, okay? And you know clearly that that maid throw that fetus into that pit. Vesafek gereru. But you don't know if those animals carry that fetus to their spot, which means they have a certain cave, a certain area that they carry the food to that spot. So that's one uncertainty. The next one, vesafek klo gereru. But you're not sure if they carry or not. Hahi shata ka de safek umotzi midei vadai. So here you have here a uncertain, and it's override a certain. Why? Because you know that it's carried. So that's the reason why the sages said that Kohen, that priest, is pure. So now you see it's the opposite of what we said earlier. So they said lo teima. There are two answers. Number one, shehetila nefel lebo. So it's clear that she threw that fetus to the pit. אלא אימה שהפילה כמין נפל. That he throws something that it appear like a nefel, which means labor. So it means that you don't know if he throw this nefel to the pit, or it was only shafir. Shafir meaning that much early stage before it's nefel, it's like a little balloon that inside the woman's womb, that it's early stage before it's developed the fetus. So it may be only that part will throw to the pit. Show you the wisdom of the sages. They know already the whole process. And therefore, they have a safek v'safek. It's uncertain within uncertainty. So therefore, you cannot go. You said, number one, if those animals put it before the Kohen came in. So it may happen that way. Or you say, so you don't know if that state the Kohen was impure or not impure. So therefore you see a contradiction from one bride to another. So there's a valid. Wait a second. You know the original discussion. We ask if this is a male or female baby. So if it's a question of male or female baby, you know already that you're talking about nefel. So they said, the response is as follows: Leida im ruach epila im nefel epila. So Rashi here used the word klomar, and I in my book, Biurei klomar b'Rashi al Hashas, dealt at length with this Rashi, a long writing. In this one, the following one. So basically, the key point is it's a uncertainty within uncertainty within uncertainty. I wish to have more time, but the key is if it was shafir, which is fill of air space, and it's not really carry a fetus or not. So they said, im nefel epila, if you know clearly that she miscarried a nefel, ואם תמצא לומר נפל הפיל על ידיים זכר או נקבה. So number one, you need to know if it's a shafir or nefel. Number two, if you have an assumption that it's already clear somehow that it's a nefel, you're not sure if it's a male or female. So he said that's the issue, and because it's such a state of uncertainty, if it's a nefel in the pit or not, so you rule that Kohen is a pure, because this uncertainty that if that animal take it, so look how many uncertainty you have here. You have uncertainty if it's a nefel, you have uncertainty if it's a male or female, you have uncertainty if that animal carry that nefel out of the pit. So therefore, that's the reason why the sages exempt from the state of impurity to that Kohen. Ribaitema, another explanation. Hatam vadayu vadayu. Over there, it's a certainty and certainty. It's twice certainty. Why? Since they have a what is called weasel and a polecat. There are many of them over there, so you know that they certainly drag it away at that time without delay. So they said, Nehi deshayu meshaira migrar miha vadai gererum ba'ushata. So you said that the weasel maybe sometimes left over some of the food, but here we see the weasel carry this leaven to a house that we already checked. So we don't say that most probably the weasel ate already it. So that's the reason why we ask a person to search against the house. Again, remember, he searched the house, you see the weasel carry the bread, so now you ask a person to do what? Again, second time to search it. But here, if the animal carried this nefel, we have the assumption that until the Kohen came there, this weasel or the other Badalas, they must probably carry it earlier. So Tosfot and Rashi and Marsha and Marshal, they all said that this issue of Tuma Olam Me'aleh, it depends how big is that pit. Because there is a concept that called that the Tuma go up high, no limitations. So they said Lishna Achrina another way. They said that we said that for sure to say that they ate, we are not sure if they ate it or not. but carry it to their place, we said that they carry it already in place. So you see here that the issue of the nefel have a lot of avenues. Just as a side note, as an example, there is in Tel Aviv a big tower building. It's called Migdal Shalom, a peace building. It's a large building. They have museum. They are very large sky building. There are some rabbis, at least in my time, that have issues to enter to that building because it was a legend, and I can't prove that it's true or not, but that's a legend. It was in the early Israel a big mafia. You know what's a mafia? I don't need to tell you, right? Not only in Italy, not only in Las Vegas. So what happened? It was a myth. It was a legend that they killed someone, and right after that they build this large project with a high sky, because if you have one floor, it's easy to several years later to pull it out, right, and go dig in and take out the dead body. But here it was a legend. So again, you see here, when you have a dead body issue, it's not just for a certain period. If it's clear that it's a dead body, then you have the issue to go and stepping at the top of the place of burial. Anyway, back to our subject. Are you sure saying that you're not concerned about the weasel that carry it from one location to another? I will learn in the following Mishnah, page 10b. Remember when we said that the person needs to search for chametz. So you need to search for chametz, but the next morning, the eve of Passover, you need to eat breakfast. So what did he do? He take that corner in the kitchen, remember we said it? And he place it in a certain location so he can eat later, so he doesn't need to make another search, because if you leave it all over, so then you need to do another search later. So, and now you don't concern that maybe the weasel carry it from one location to another. So Amar Abaye, lo kasha, it's not a question. Ha ב-14 ha ב-13. You have to differentiate between the 14th of Nisan, which means the eve of Passover, then the previous day, the 13th of Nisan. So if you take about 13th of Nisan, you're not concerned about the weasel carried from one location to another. Versus if it's a 14, now you enter that question. ב-13 לשכיח ריבתא וכולי בתי לא מצנע. ב-14 לשכיח ריבתא וכולי בתי הוא מצנע. Beautiful. They said, let's face it, those small weasel, they, if they know that there's a plenty of food, let's say plenty of bread, they don't bother, because they know it's plenty of food there, right? So if you see it carry something, some leaven, you need to search again. But that apply in the 14. So let's say at the 13 the weasel see that there's a lot of bread, so you don't have any concern. But at the 14 the weasels realize that there's no leaven in the house. It's a chance for the weasel to do what? To take it and hide it. So the Ran and the Tosfot Rosh said that in that case, then you need to go ahead and search again. And that's the difference between 13 and 14. What you tell me, the weasel is a prophecy? That they know in advance what's going on? So it's like using here a euphemism a little bit, like a simile. It was a prophetess. One of the famous biblical prophetesses was name is Hulda, meaning weasel. It's a name of a female prophetess. But here we don't use it. The Avetz explain. The question is, those weasel has this type of level of prognostication, meaning they call it a sense. It's not really prognostication. It's called, the Ben Ish Chai call it tchuna. The Avetz call it some type of trait. They have some reflection or feeling. So in that sense, that animal is worried about now, at this very moment. They said, for example, the Yerushalmi said that the mice know to recognize quantity between a large amount and a small amount. So the big question is, if this weasel have this intuition, reflection trait to recognize it. So they said the Idna, that they know that today is what Arbesa, that the weasel know that today is 14. Velo ape ad leorcha leota. So tonight they're not going to cook, to bake any more bread. Umeshayra umetamra. So therefore she take it like a small ant and hide it and waiting to have food for the next day? אלא אמר הרב said, מה שמשער הניחנו בצנעה שם תיטול חולדה בפנינו ויוצר בדיקה אחריו. So Rashi explained that that's apply only as we said that if you really physically see this weasel carry that leaven inside a house that already searched, and therefore you need to search again that house. Tanya, kvatei derava, רוצה לאכול חמץ אחר בדיקה כיצד יעשה? That's a practical הלכה. If someone searched for חמץ at 13, he now wants to eat the next morning breakfast, so what he should do? מה שמשיער הניחנו בצנעה שלו דבור חולדה ותפלון בפניו ויצטרך בדיקה אחריו. So what left over, he needs to put in a certain location, he needs to better even write down what exactly left, and needs to search to make sure that nothing left next morning, no one take anything, because if it's the issue of weasel, then you need to search again. רב מרי אמר, גזירה שמניח 10 וימצא 9. Guess what? You know, some people have the 10 pieces of bread that they put. So all the rabbis tells us that you have to write a list of location. Why? Because you may put 10 and then you come next
and only find 9.
And you find 9. So what happened here? So he said, so Chidushei Aran was brought in the Or Chaim Taf Lamed Dalet and the 434 in the code that said that if you found only 9, you have the assumption that most probably the weasel ate one of them. So now you're going to go back to the old business. So it's a Shitot Rishonim, it's early sages that go further and said that the whole idea of searching for Chametz, you remember that it said it's rabbinic. Biblically speaking, what do you have to do? Nullify. Rabbinically speaking, you have to go and search. So if it's rabbinic, Sfeika de Rabbanan lekula, we have to go lenient with the doubt with rabbinic. So since you have to have this search, so Rashi said you have to go always lenient because it's a rabbinic uncertainty. Tosfot said because you have to go and think that this house is called Bechezkat Baduk. You have the assumption that it's already chametz free, that house. So now we bring a series of examples if it's a state of uncertainty and you need to have another search on that. 9 ציבורים של מצה ואחד של חמץ ואתה עכבר ושקל ולא יודעים אם מצה שקל היא חמץ שקל. You have here piles of 9 piles of matzah and 1 pile of leaven. And now you have this weasel or mice that came in and pulled out one of them, and you don't know if it's a matzah or it's a leaven. They use that as a language of exaggeration, but they want us to conceptualize the point. So they said, since the majority is what? Matzah, so you have to go by the majority or not. So think together with me. Imagine a fellow go to a place like, let's say a street in Monsey, New York, Brooklyn, New York, that they have mainly kosher stores. And it's a 9 stores that carries a kosher meat, and 1 store that carry non-kosher meat. Okay? And a fellow have here a piece of meat and is not sure if it was purchased from the 9 store or from the store that it's non-kosher. How you treat it?
By the majority.
You may think that it's...
I would say not.
Oh, so the question is, usually we go stringent when it's come to this, right, because it's called Kol Kavua Kemechza al Mechza Dami. So we basically treated, yes, biblically speaking, you may think that that street, you have the what is called, it's not statistic, it's the assumption, right? Mm-hmm. That most of the street, it's kosher. Now, the big idea is that it's called basar shenit alem min ha'ayin, that you're not sure about that meat, it's hiding from your eyes. You don't know what's going on, what happened. Trace the situation. You're a mashgiach in the Hyatt hotel, and all of a sudden one of those, let's say Puerto Rican employee, went to McDonald's across the street and carry a ham, and now he's switching. He figured out that the kosher meat is a better quality, so he pull out the ham and put it in the pot and take inside the pot the kosher schnitzel and put it inside his sandwich, right? Can happen, right? Because why? Because he feels that the kosher one is a better quality. So now you don't know, there's a large part of meat and you don't know what's going on. He switches or not switches, what's going on here. So you see here that is the uncertainty sometimes within uncertainty. So you don't know if it's a חמץ שקל, היינו 9 חנויות, פרש, ואת העכבר, היינו סיפה. So if you tell me that one of them disappear, is go by the second clause, that's the Tanya 9 חנויות כולם מוכרים בשר שחוטה. אחת מוכרת בשר נבלה, 9 stores selling kosher meat, 1 store selling non-kosher, ולקח מאחד מהם וזו מה לקח, is purchased from one of them, you're not sure which one, ספק או אסור. So we said that if, since it's not clear, you said that it's prohibited. Why? ובנמצא עליך אחר הרוב. Here, if it's a mice took, you go by the majority. So therefore, even you go by the majority that it's 9 pile of matzah, but since it's taken from that spot, so you said that you don't know, you don't know for sure. So, but the majority is matzah. You said you don't need to search again. Versus in a meat situation, you go and you said, yes, you're not going by the majority. You go how? By the assumption that is a possibility. And since it's a possibility, you go ahead and you say that it's not kosher meat. The third halacha, שני ציבורים, אחד של מצה ואחד של חמץ, 2 pile, 1 מצה, 1 חמץ, ולפניהם 2 בתים, and they have at the front of them 2 houses, אחד בדוק ואחד מנוק. One house was searched for חמץ, another house did not search for חמץ. ועדו 2 עכברים, אחד שקל מצה ואחד שקל חמץ, as 2 mice came in, and 1 ate from the pile of matzah, 1 ate from the pile of chametz, of leaven, ולא יודעים אלה האל ואלה האל, which one the mice went to? היינו 2 קופות דתניא, 2 קופות, אחת של חולין ואחת של תרומה. If you have two baskets, one belong to the temple, it's תרומה, contributed, one is חולין, and you said, ולפניהם 2 שאים, אחד של חולין ואחד של תרומה, ונפלו אלו לתאולן, זה 2 piles, one is contributed and one not, so you're not sure, שאני אומר, מותרים, you allow it. Why? שאני אומר, חולין לתוך חולין נפלו, תרומה לתוך נפלה. So here you go by the assumption of statistics that you said it must probably go one pile go to the others. So they said, אמרו דאמרינן שאני אומר, that apply בתרומה דרבנן, page 10. That's apply to what? To תרומה that is rabbinic. But חמץ דאורייתא מאמרינן, but how do you compare it to the leaven? Leaven is biblically. And how do you compare rabbinic to a biblical prohibition? So Rashi said that the idea of a truma, the same apply here. Truma is biblically, and the idea of biblically bringing the tithe apply to Eretz Israel, and it is a condition that you have most of the people living there, and or majority of the people living there, etc. in the time of the temple. So they said, "Atu bdikat chametz deoraita." So you go by the searching for chametz, and you say that it's rabbinic, it's not biblically. The rabbanani u'midoraita bitul me'abasagala. That's what we said all the times. Biblically speaking, what do you have to do? You have to nullify, and that's it. The search of chametz is rabbinic. So the idea of being lenient when the searching of chametz, it's the source of that is the whole idea that is rabbinic. Because if you're uncertain if the house is chametz free or not, that's the Marshai said. You follow here the Tosfot. The Tosfot said that even it's a rabbinic. We have the chezkat baduk. We have the assumption that it's already searched. So he said because it's safek chametz, it's a doubt if it's a leaven or not, and it's rabbinic. You go all leniency, and that's the resolution of the second situation. First halacha is Shulchan Aruch halacha 434. We talk about weasel. After searching a leaven, one should place all remaining leaven in a concealed location so that weasel cannot take in, which will lead to halachic complications. However, if there is no clear evidence to the contrary, one doesn't need to be concerned of a weasel. In fact, drag the leaven from one place to another. We also talk about artifice in tithing. We said one who brings grain into his courtyard before removing the shaft in order to feed it to his animals may eat it himself in his courtyard. The reason for this leniency is that the obligation to tithe is not yet in effect with regard to this produce, and that's Yoredea 3:31. We talk about if one leavens over a pit in which there may be a stillborn baby, and there are a weasel or similar animals in the area, so the assumption is that the animal took the stillborn and ate it, and the person leaving it over the pit is ritually pure. That's Rambam Ilchot Truma, Ilchot Tumat Men, chapter 9. We talk about 9 piles, 9 stores. He said in 9 stores in a city sell kosher meat, and 1 store sell non-kosher meat, and a person brought meat from one of them, but does not remember which one. So he said, this meat is not kosher. If the meat was found outside the store, it's permitted. If outside of a kosher store, that's permitted. That's Shulchan Aruch Yoredea 110. Now we talk. That's the last halacha. If we have 2 piles, in general, we're in a state of uncertainty. So he said, if there are 2 piles, one have 11, one matzah, and you have the position before 2 houses, if one of which a search of 11 was conducted and the other not, and you concern what's happening, so the owner just need to make this nullification, and by doing so he is free. That's Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 439 and Rambam Ilchot Chametz U'Matzah chapter 2.